Hey there guys, it's Tina and I'm back, and I hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe. If you're also back, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again. But if you're new and maybe you like what you see, please consider subscribing because we have tons of fun here on this channel talking about makeup and all things beauty. And today I have a long overdue video. This is going to be my foundation collection, and I believe it is 4.0. Actually, let me check that. Yes, I was right. It is 4.0, but it is long overdue because the last one I did was 4 years ago. So I am finally getting around to doing this foundation collection. And if you haven't seen the previous three, I will link them over here and also down below so you can check them out. This is a video where I swatch all the current foundations that I have in my collection. I do these swatches on my forearm as well as on my jawline, so you can see these different shades swatched on my skin tone in case you use me as a shade reference for your foundations. We all know that getting a foundation shade match is kind of the bane of our makeup existence. Sometimes it is so difficult, especially if you're not able to swatch the foundations in store. So I like to do these videos as a reference for you guys who may use me as your shade match reference. I know a lot of you look to me to try out new foundations to see if I can find the shade match, so then you can go ahead and pick up the same shade because you match up pretty closely to me. Now, I'm not proclaiming to have tried every single foundation on the market. Let's be honest, that is kind of ridiculous and I'm not going to do it. But I have quite a significant collection and I've tried quite a few foundations out. So if I don't swatch a specific foundation, maybe just search on my channel by that foundation name and maybe it will pop up. Otherwise, I probably haven't tried it yet, so don't hold that against me. And what I like to do before I jump into the actual swatches of the foundations is explain what I look for when I'm selecting a foundation shade. What depth am I looking for? What undertones? And what cues do I look for in the actual shade name or description? So for me, I consider myself to have a dark tan complexion with a golden neutral undertone, and I've grappled between those two undertones a bit. When I just started out, I would gravitate towards golden undertones or yellow undertone foundations, and since then I've learned a little bit more about my undertones and what works best for me, and now these days I tend to veer more into the neutral realm because what I found is most foundations that say yellow or golden tend to look a little bit too mustardy on me. I can end up looking like a Simpsons character, and that's not what we're going for. So the keywords that I have been looking for in shade descriptions and shade names are things like amber or golden olive, golden neutral, neutral yellow undertones, but I stay away from cool, pink, red undertones, even warm undertones. Sometimes warm undertones can veer into the peachy orange side of things, and that's not where I land. I land very neutral with a bit of golden hue to it. And if I can get a good mix between a golden and a neutral undertone, I am set when it comes to foundations. And I also go right into the tan or dark shades of a foundation. For luxury and high-end foundations, I tend to find my shade among the dark tones, and that's a little bit tricky to navigate. Sometimes I'm the starting shade in the dark range, or I'm the very last shade in the dark tan range. There are other ranges where I will fall smack dab in the middle of the tan range. If they have like a limited range of foundations, I'm the tan shade automatically. So I tend to know where to look for my shade, and then I look for those keywords. Like if I see a shade that says dark tan skin with neutral golden undertones, that's my exact description. That's the shade. Grab it right now. And I don't always find a perfect match, as you will see in the swatches. And that's exactly what this video is meant for. It's to show you the shades that I've picked out from different brands, different foundation formulations that I have tested out, and to let you know whether the shades work for me or if I was able to find my perfect shade. And that way you can use me as your guinea pig to test out these shades and determine if any of these shades might work for you instead, or it may just help you to find the shades that you need to stay away from. Now, like I said, I've done other foundation collection videos. linked down below. And I've done different foundation reviews and try-ons in Get Ready With Me. So if you just search my channel, more than likely you can find the foundation that you're looking for. I also have a video where I swatched, I believe it was my top 10 best foundation shade matches. So if that is something that may work for you as well, definitely check that video out over here and down below. But without much further ado, let's go ahead and do a full swatch fest of all the foundations that I currently have in my collection, along with the shades that I picked up, and I'll walk you through the shade descriptions and let you know if these shades work for me or not. Let's start out with one of my favorite brands for foundations, Dior. When it comes to Dior, I've always enjoyed their formulations, and I'm also able to find a pretty good shade match. So first up we have from the Dior Backstage line, the Face and Body Foundation. The shade I have is 4.5 Warm, and this is actually one of the best foundation shade matches that I have in my collection. It is more on the gold and neutral side, and it really blends in well with my skin. There's no red or pink to this shade at all. Next up we have the Dior Forever Skin Glow Foundation, which has since been reformulated, but I still use the same shade, which is 4.5N. This is meant for medium skin with neutral undertones, and this again works really well on my skin tone. The neutral shades from Dior just blend really well with my golden neutral undertones, and they never lean too olive or too gray. Then we have the Dior Forever Matte Foundation, also in shade 4.5N. Again, it's meant for medium skin with neutral undertones. This matches up with the Skin Glow Foundation, and it blends in beautifully. Again, it leans a little bit more golden neutral, and there are no pinky undertones. Next up, we have the Dior Skin Forever Undercover Foundation. I have the shade 050, which is dark beige, and this is meant for medium to deep skin with neutral undertones. This one is way too dark and way too rich for my skin tone, and I think it has been discontinued, so we won't get too far into it, but it does have more neutral lead-in undertones and a little bit of that golden hue as well. Then we have the Dior Airflash Spray Foundation, and they've expanded the shade range for this, and I picked up shade 4WO, which is warm olive. It's meant for medium skin with warm olive undertones. This is the closest match I have in this spray foundation, and it does work really well for my skin tone as well, but it leans a little bit more on the olive side, so you can see a hint of green to it, but because I have a neutral undertone, it actually works pretty well, and it doesn't lean gray at all. Now we're moving into a group of more high-end luxury foundations, starting off with Gucci. This is the Gucci Natural Finish Fluid Foundation. The shade I have is 360W, which is meant for medium skin with warm undertones. This one definitely has a golden hue to it. It isn't pink or red, and it's actually a pretty decent match from Gucci. It blends in really well with my skin tone. Then we have the Very Valentino 24-Hour Wear Liquid Foundation. I have the shade DN2, which is meant for very tan to deep skin with warm neutral undertones. This one actually leans a little bit more on the orange side. It doesn't have that golden hue to it. It looks a little bit more peachy. It is not the best match on my skin tone, but because it's more on the peachy side rather than being pink, I can make it work, but not my favorite skin tone match. Then we have the Westman Atelier Vital Skin Foundation Stick. I have two shades of this foundation. I have Atelier 11, which is a warm toffee caramel with a neutral undertone. This shade is a great undertone match, but it is just slightly too light for my skin tone. I can still make it work because the undertone match is great. Then I have Atelier 12, which is a deep caramel with neutral undertone. This one is too deep for my skin tone, but it does have that caramel golden hue to it. I wouldn't use this on its own. If anything, I would use it as a contour shade or mix it in with a lighter foundation to get a better match. Then we have the Chantecaille Future Skin Foundation in the shade Suntan. This is for rich brown skin with deep rose undertones. As you can tell right away, this one is not a good shade match. It's not a good undertone match. It has more of that rosy orange undertone, and on my skin, it does read orange. I can make it work. I can balance it out, but it wouldn't be my go-to shade, and I wouldn't recommend it if you use me as a shade tone match. Then we have the NARS foundations in my collection. I have 3 different formulations, starting off with the original NARS Sheer Glow foundation. I have the shade Tahoe, which is meant for medium deep skin with golden undertones. For the longest time, this was my go-to foundation. It was so great, oh my god. And now that you look at it, you're like, what are you thinking? This is way too light for my skin tone. They've since added shades that work a little bit better. This has a definite golden undertone to it, and I can make it work because it's more on the thin side, but definitely not my best shade match. Then we have the NARS Soft Matte Complete Foundation. I have the shade Huahine, which is MD 2.6, which is meant for medium dark skin with neutral undertones. This one is a little bit too peach for it to be neutral on my skin tone, so I don't know where they're going with that. But if I blend it out and use a light hand, it can work. It's just not my best match. I also have shade Macau, which is MD4. This is meant for medium dark to dark skin with olive undertones. And this one I picked up because it's the next neutral undertone shade. And as you can see, it's just too rich and deep for my skin tone. I can mix the 2 shades again to create my perfect match, but so far I haven't found my perfect match in this formulation. Then we have NARS Light Reflecting Advanced Skincare Foundation. Also have this in Huahine. That's again MD 2.6. It's meant for medium deep skin with neutral undertones. This one actually blends in pretty well with my skin, even though when I swatch it on my face it looks a little bit light, but it's a lighter weight foundation, so it actually blends in seamlessly with my skin. And I would say this is my best match that I found from NARS, and it's in their newest foundation. Let's continue with the higher end side of things. So we have my Yves Saint Laurent YSL Touche Éclat Le Tint Radiant Liquid Foundation. The shade I have is B70 Mocha, which is meant for medium deep skin with golden undertones. This one actually works pretty well on my skin tone, believe it or not, but it may be just slightly too rich, but it blends in nicely, and it's probably one of the better matches that I have from YSL. I also have the Yves Saint Laurent All Hours Longwear Natural Matte Foundation. Again, this shade is not the best shade for me, but they've since reformulated this foundation, and the shade I picked up instead is DN1, which actually works pretty well on my skin tone. It's meant for medium deep skin tones with neutral undertones if you wanted a reference. I wasn't able to swatch it in this video, but I will link below a video where I use this foundation in case you wanted that for reference. Then we have the Armani Beauty Luminous Silk Perfect Glow Flawless Oil-Free Foundation. Say that 10 times fast. I have shade 9, which is meant for tan to deep skin with olive undertones. This is way too light for me, and since this is an olive undertone, it can read a little bit too neutral, a little bit too gray, and give a green hue to my skin, so it's not my perfect match. Then we have the Shiseido Synchro Skin Radiant Lifting Foundation. The shade I picked up in this is 440 Amber, which is a golden shade with a slightly olive undertone for rich tan skin. And this one doesn't work at all. It's too deep, it's too glowy. I don't like this foundation, so we can skip right along. We have the Kevyn Aucoin Beauty Stripped Nude Skin Tint. The shade I have here is Deep 08, which is a deep foundation with yellow undertones. Again, not the best match for me. It's too deep, and you'll see that it looks a little bit too orange. So I can pretty much skip this entire lineup except for the new formulation of the YSL All Hours foundation. Keeping with the high-end foundation, we have Lancome Teint Idole Ultra 24-Hour Longwear Matte Foundation. The shade I picked up from this is 470 Suede C, and this is meant for deep skin with cool pink undertones. And you're probably like, why did you pick that shade? And I would ask you the same thing, but it's the best shade match for me. Their shade matches are very screwy, and this one ends up being a little bit too rich for my skin tone, but surprisingly, the undertones work. It's not too red, it's not too pink at all, and if I blend it just so, I can make it work. But I still haven't found my perfect match from Lancome, and I like this foundation, so I'm gonna still keep trying. Then we have Charlotte Tilbury. Starting out with the Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Medium Coverage Liquid Foundation, I have the shade 11 Neutral. This is meant for tan skin with neutral undertones. This one works okay for me, but I don't love this foundation, so it wouldn't be my go-to. And it's a little bit too light, it's a little bit too peachy, but I mean, it works decently. Then I have the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Longwear Foundation. I picked up the shade 10 Cool, which is meant for tan skin with cool undertones. Another one where I went for a cool undertone because the neutral undertones were just a little bit too gray on my skin. And this one you can see definitely reads too pink. It can work. Again, I can make the majority of these bad shade matches work, but I'm just not gonna put in the effort, so I would skip this one. It's too pink, it's too cool tone. Then we have the Charlotte Tilbury Magic Foundation, and I have two shades of this. I have number 9 Dark, which is meant for light tan or tan skin tones with yellow, moderately yellow undertones. And this one is too yellow, it leads a little bit orange on my skin tone, and it's a little bit too light. So then I have the shade 9.5 Dark, which is for deep skin tones with warm golden undertones. This one works a little better, but it still has this orangey hue to it when it's blended out on my skin, so it doesn't work the best. So far, I haven't been able to find a great foundation match from Charlotte Tilbury, and her shade ranges are very limited, so I skip Charlotte Tilbury altogether when it comes to foundations. Here's another grouping of higher end foundations, starting out with Estee Lauder Double Wear Stay in Place Foundation, which is a go-to signature foundation for oily skin. This one I got in shade 5N1 Rich Ginger, which is meant for deep skin with neutral undertones. It's a decent shade match. It reads a little bit orange or a little bit too peach, but I can make it work again, and it's my best match from Estee Lauder. Then we have the Laura Mercier Candle Glow Soft Luminous Foundation. This is discontinued, but I picked up the shade Pecan, and it was just too yellow for me. I did look like a pecan pie in this foundation. So moving on to the Lisa Eldridge Seamless Skin Foundation. I have two shades. I have number 23, which is a medium foundation with golden olive undertones, which is right up my alley. And when I swatch this out on my skin and blend it out, it does dry a little bit deeper than it swatches wet, so you have to play around with this foundation. And this shade match actually works pretty well for me in the winter time when my skin is a little bit lighter. I also picked up number 26, which is a medium deep foundation with neutral undertones. Now this one is a richer, deeper shade, but it has a neutral undertone, and it works pretty decently again once I blend it out on my skin, especially when I have a tan. Again, these foundations are a little bit tricky because they dry down a little bit differently than they swatch. And these two shades, for whatever reason, when I blend them out on my skin, work pretty well. I would go with shade 23 if I had to choose my best match. Moving on, we have the Fenty foundations, and Fenty has expanded their range, and I haven't found my perfect match, but I found shades that work pretty well for me. So for the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter Soft Matte Longwear Liquid Foundation, which is the original foundation, I have two shades. I have 360, which is meant for tan skin with neutral undertones. This one is just a little bit too light on my skin, but the undertone works really well. It does lean more neutral golden, and I can make it work. Then we have 385, which is meant for tan to deep skin with neutral undertones. This one reads a little bit peachy, a little bit orange, but it works on my skin tone, and so far this is the best match that I've found from Fenty. I use 385 in the concealer, which is a great match, but for the foundations it's a little bit tricky. I can make it work, but it's not spot on perfect. Then we have the Fenty Beauty Ease Drop Blurring Skin Tint. This is my favorite foundation from Fenty. I have two shades, number 16, which is meant for medium skin with neutral olive undertones. This is great on my skin tone. This matches me so well, and it's one of my go-to foundations. I have to be a little bit careful because it can read a little bit too gray, a little bit too olive in certain lighting, but for the most part, it is a great match. I also have shade 17, which is medium deep with warm neutral undertones. This also works for me, but it's a little bit more on the orange peachy side, so I prefer to use shade 16, but 17 can kind of work as well. Then we have the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter Hydrating Longwear Foundation, which has been discontinued, so we don't have to speak much on this. This is shade 410, which is meant for tan to deep skin with warm golden undertones, and it's definitely warm, it's definitely golden, it has more of an orangey undertone, and it's not my shade match. It's too deep for my skin, but it's been discontinued, so let's move right along. Now we're moving into more of the medium high-end brands. So we have Anastasia Beverly Hills. This is the Luminous Foundation. I picked up the shade 440C, which is for tan skin with cool golden undertones. And ABH is just screwy with their shade matches, but this one actually works pretty well for me with its cool undertones. I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't read very cool. It is more on the golden side, and it even reads a little bit neutral. So I don't know where they're going with that, but this shade actually works pretty well on my skin tone. Then we have the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Luminous Matte Foundation, which has also been reformulated. This one I have in shade 430N Gingerbread, and this one is meant for warmer tan skin with neutral undertone. This match actually works pretty well on my skin tone as well. It dries a little bit deeper than its swatches, and it's a full coverage foundation, so you have to make sure you have a pretty decent match. I can make it work, but it's not spot on. But it's full coverage, it's matte, it's beautiful. It's just a little bit too light for my skin tone, but again, I can make it work when blending concealer, bronzer, all that good stuff. Then we have the Beauty Blender Bounce Liquid Whip Longwear Foundation. Say that 10 times fast. I have the shade 410C/O, which is Cool Olive, and this is described as a tan suede. This foundation is beautiful. It is an excellent match on my skin tone. It has that olivey undertone, which can read a little bit too gray in some light, but this for some reason just works well on my skin tone. It's a beautiful foundation, beautiful finish, and it's very underrated. I think this one is worth checking out. Moving on to Clinique, we have the Clinique Even Better Clinical Serum Foundation. I have the shade WN100 Deep Honey, which is meant for medium skin with warm neutral undertones. This one is actually pretty nice. It works really well on my complexion. It's a pretty decent match. It may look a little bit too peachy, but it actually blends in pretty well with my skin tone. And again, once I blend everything else over it, it looks fantastic. Then we have the Clinique Acne Solutions Liquid Makeup Foundation. This is a tinted BB cream or a skin tint. This shade is Fresh Ginger, which is meant for deep skin with warm neutral undertones. And it works pretty well on my skin tone as well. It's a little bit more orange, so I do have to be careful with it, but I can make it work. And I think Clinique has great formulations as well. It's just the shades are a little bit questionable. I haven't been able to find my perfect shade. I've been able to find shades that work for me, just not spot on. Now we're moving on to Urban Decay and Too Faced. So we have the Urban Decay Naked Skin One and Done Hybrid Foundation. This is discontinued, but my perfect shade in this was dark. It matched me so well. I really loved it. It was lightweight and it worked for me. So I'm sad that they discontinued that. But they also have the Urban Decay Stay Naked Weightless Foundation. The best match I found for this is 70NN, which is a dark neutral foundation with neutral undertones. This actually works really well on my skin tone. It leans a little bit more on the golden neutral side, so it matches me pretty well when blended out, and I use the same shade in the concealer, which works well for me. So I would say that is my perfect match from Urban Decay. Then I have the Urban Decay Hydromaniac Glowy Tinted Hydrator Foundation. I don't know why that name is so long, but here we are. I have the shade 70, which is dark warm. This one is way too peach for me, okay? I don't like this foundation. I've since gotten rid of it, and I don't even know if they still make it, but it's too glowy and too orange, so moving right along. Then we have the Too Faced Peach Perfect Comfort Matte Foundation. They have discontinued this, and I am so upset because I really love this foundation. I have the shade Mocha, which is meant for rich tan skin with rosy undertones. Now, it definitely reads a little bit more on the rosy pink side, as you can tell, swatched out on my cheek. But it still works and blends out really well. I love the finish of this, so I'm really sad that they discontinued it. I also have the Too Faced Born This Way Matte 24-Hour Foundation in the shade Mocha as well. Again, for rich tan skin with rosy undertones. And you'll see these two swatched out look different on my skin tone. The matte foundation looks a little bit more on the golden side, And this shade, again, works well on my skin tone. Not my perfect match, but it still works pretty well. Moving into the more medium end foundations, we have the Pure Cosmetics 4-in-1 Love Your Selfie Longwear Foundation. They have 100 shades to choose from, and it's very tricky. So I have 3 shades. I have DN2 Walnut, which is meant for light brown skin with neutral undertones. I figured this would be my match, and it comes pretty close, but it's a little bit too light. It does read a little bit peach, but it also has a little bit of golden undertone to it, so I can make it work, but it's just not my perfect match. I also have DN3, which is caramel, and this is meant for brown skin with neutral undertones. I thought this would be like the ideal match, but it's a little bit too rich for my skin tone, as you can tell. It does have a decent skin tone match, but it leans, again, a little bit too orange. The third shade is DN4 Cinnamon, which is meant for brown skin with neutral undertones. This one has more of a golden leaning undertone. And I don't understand how all 3 of these shades are neutral undertone, because it makes no sense. I can mix DN2 and DN4 to get a good match, but so far I haven't been able to find my great match in Pure, and I'm very sad about that because the formulation is actually pretty great. I'll mix the shades if I feel so inclined, but I tend to just gravitate to a foundation that already matches me. Then we have the Uma Beauty Say What Foundation. Again, another brand that I haven't been able to find my perfect match. We have the shade Bronze Venus T2N, which is meant for rich tan skin with neutral undertones. I thought this was gonna be my match, but you can see it's too peachy, it's too orange, it doesn't match me. I look like an Oompa Loompa, I don't like it. Then I picked up Brown Sugar, which is T1W, which is brown skin with warm undertones, and I should have known better, because if the neutral was orange, then what did I expect from the warm? And it's very orange. Again, Oompa Loompa, and it's a little bit too rich for my skin tone. So none of these shades match me well, and I'm very sad about it. Moving on, we have the Bare Minerals Bare Pro Performance Wear Liquid Foundation. The shade I have is Chai 26, which is for dark, warm skin with golden undertones. I think this foundation may be discontinued, but this was actually a pretty decent match from Bare Minerals. It worked really well for me. It has, again, the golden undertones, but it leans a little bit neutral, so it definitely works for my skin. Then we have one of my favorite foundations from yesteryear. It's been discontinued, but I wanted to show you guys. This is Makeup Forever Matte Velvet Plus Foundation. I had shade 70 and it worked so well, and I love the formulation. This was excellent. Then we have the reformulation that replaced this foundation, which is the Makeup Forever Matte Velvet Skin Full Coverage Foundation. I picked up 2 shades of this one because I just couldn't find my match. So we have Y455 Praline, which is for darker tan skin with deep golden undertones. And this one is just a little bit too light for my skin tone. I don't understand, like, how did it get so light? And it is definitely more on the golden side. Then we have Y505 Cognac, which is for dark skin with neutral undertones. This one actually works a lot better. It's slightly too rich for my skin tone, but I can make it work. I can blend it in. But again, I haven't been able to find my perfect match anymore from Makeup Forever. We also have the Cover FX Power Play Foundation. I don't even know if Cover FX is around anymore, much less this foundation, but I did get the shade N80, which is for medium deep skin with neutral undertones, and this one worked out pretty well for me. It was a decent match, even though it reads a little bit peachy, but I was able to blend it out and it worked well. But again, it may be a non-factor because it may no longer exist. Now we have the more affordable foundations in my collection, starting off with Morphe of all brands. So I did pick up this Morphe Filter Effect Soft Focus Foundation. I have the shade Filter Rich 25, which is for rich skin with pink undertones. What? Pink undertones? I know what you're thinking, but look at the match on my skin tone. This does not read pink. It reads very neutral. It reads golden. It works for my skin tone. It blends out really well. And the formulation is actually pretty good, surprisingly. So I do like this foundation. I don't necessarily like Morphe, but the foundation works really well. Then I have the Morphe 2 Hint Hint Skin Tint, and I picked up Hint of Cappuccino, which is for deep tan skin with neutral undertones. This reads a little bit peachy, but it actually also works pretty well on my skin tone because it is a skin tint, but it blends out really well, and I like the formulation, so believe it or not, it's 2 for 2 for Morphe. I like these foundations, and I like the skin match. Then we have the ColourPop No Filter Foundation, which has been discontinued. Why? This was such a good foundation. The shade I have is Dark 165, which is a warm foundation with gold and olive undertones for dark skin tones. I don't know about that description, but it works for me, okay? This shade was really great, has neutral undertones, leans a little bit more golden, and it worked. It just worked, and I like the formulation as well, so I'm sad that they discontinued it. Then we have the Juvia's Place I Am Magic Foundation. I picked up 2 shades because this foundation is also tricky to match because it's a full coverage foundation, so if you're off at all, it's not going to work. I picked up 430 Rio, which is for tan skin with gold and olive undertones. I thought this was gonna work. It's a little bit too green, and it reads green on my skin, and it's also a little bit too light. It does have a golden undertone, but there's that olive to it as well, so it doesn't work well for me. I also picked up 435 Punta Cana, which is for tan skin with neutral golden undertones. Again, not a great match. It does blend out on my skin. This one is a better match for me than Rio, but I just haven't been able to find my perfect match from Juvia's Place, and it makes me sad because I want to be able to support a black-owned brand. Here are some obscure lower mid-range brands. We have the Sephora Collection Best Skin Ever Liquid Foundation. This I have in shade 35N, which is for medium dark skin with neutral undertones, and I love this foundation so much. It's such a good match on my skin tone. It definitely looks a little bit lighter, but it has the perfect balance of golden undertones and neutral undertones. It blends out really well. It's a fantastic formulation. If you wanted to get a decent price foundation with a great formulation and a good shade range, definitely check out the Sephora collection. This foundation is top notch. I also love the concealer, which I have in the same shade. Then we have this obscure brand, which is EX1 Cosmetics. It's the Invisiwear Liquid Foundation. I was able to find this online. I use shade 14, and it's such a great match. It may not look like it, but it's a great foundation match for me. It's a great formulation, and it's a great price point as well. Their shade range is trash, but this shade works really well for me. Then we have the Innisfree Velvet Cover Foundation. This is a K-beauty brand that I was also able to find online, but I cannot find my perfect shade match. The formulation is really great, but none of these shades work for me. I have W37, which is way too light. I don't even want to talk about it. It's way too light, and it's beige. It ain't gonna work for me. Then I have W41, which is too dark, but I can mix it and make it work, but I haven't been able to find my perfect match, so I don't use this foundation much. Now we have a couple of drugstore brands, starting off with Maybelline. This is the Super Stay Full Coverage Foundation. I picked up 2 shades of this, and it's interesting because they're in different packaging, and I don't understand, but it's still the same foundation. So I picked up Toffee, which is shade 330. This one is actually a pretty decent match. It has more of a warm undertone to it, but it works well once I blend it out on my skin tone. I also picked up Cappuccino, which is 340. This one has more of a neutral leaning olive undertone. This also works well, but it's one of those foundations that has a lot of olive undertone to it, so it can look a little bit green, but if I mix these 2 shades, it works really well. But again, I don't like mixing foundations. I'd rather just reach for one shade that works. But this formulation is a really good one from the drugstore. The formulation works really well. It's more on the matte side. I really do like it. I just wish I had a better match. Then I have the Neutrogena Clear Coverage Flawless Matte CC Cream. Now this is not a light coverage CC cream. It is more of a foundation, and it has a matte finish, and I really like this formulation. It feels lightweight. I picked up 2 shades again because drugstore foundations, I can never find my perfect match. So I have 7.5 Ginger, which I don't need to tell you is way too light, alright? But I can make it work if I mix it with a deeper shade, which is why I picked up 8.0 Amber. And this shade is too rich for me. So you see my problem here. I'd have to mix the 2 shades, but this formulation is also a pretty great one. Has a matte finish. It feels lightweight. It's really comfortable. So I like these formulations and I would recommend them, but as you can see, matching your shade is going to be a problem. They have a really shitty shade range and I wish they would do better. Here we have my cream and stick foundations. I've since added another cream foundation, but I wasn't able to swatch it in this video, which is the Patrick Ta cream foundation. But here we have the KVD Beauty Good Apple Skin Perfecting Hydrating Foundation Balm. I have two shades of this foundation. I have Tan 066, which is for medium to tan skin with neutral undertones. And this one actually works pretty decently on my skin tone, but it's slightly too light. The undertone matches me because it's neutral, but it leans a little bit more golden. So then I picked up Tan 074, which is for tan to deep skin with neutral golden undertones. Again, the undertone for this works well, but it's a little bit too dark for me. So I have to mix the two shades. I haven't found my perfect match. That makes me very irritated, but I do like this foundation, but the transfer is crazy, but the finish, beautiful. Then we have my stick foundations. First up is the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Invisible Cover Stick Foundation. The shade I picked up is Y445 Amber, which is for darker tan skin with neutral undertones. And this one is too light for me, obviously. It's way too light. It's not a good formulation for me. I don't like it, so we can move right along. It has a golden undertone, but as you can tell, it's way too light. Then we have the Lancome Teint Idole Ultra Wear Makeup Stick, which has been discontinued. They've reformulated this. This is now the Teint Idole Ultra Wear 5-in-1 Foundation Stick. The shade I have in this is 450 Suede N, which is meant for medium deep skin with neutral undertones. And this is actually a really good shade match from Lancome. I really like this foundation as well. So I don't know if the new formulation matches up, but this was a really great stick foundation for me. Here we have some of the newer foundations to my collection, which are from the mid to high-end brands. First up is Kosas. This is the Revealer Skin Improving Foundation, and this one has SPF 25 and hyaluronic acid and niacinamide. This I picked up two different shades. So I have shade 340, which is medium deep neutral warm, and it's meant for medium deep skin with subtle peach undertones. And this match, no. It's a little bit too peach for me. You definitely see the orangey undertones. This did not work for me at all. It's a really bad skin match. So I went ahead and picked up shade 360, which is medium deep neutral olive, which is meant for medium deep skin with neutral olive undertones. This one actually works a little bit better. It may look a little bit rich on the arm swatch, but on my face, you'll see that it matches me a little bit better. And the neutral undertones definitely work for me. This one is a little bit olive as well, but it's not too olive where it reads gray. So this match works out. I can blend it and make it work, but it's not my perfect skin tone match. Then we have the newest formulation of the Makeup Forever HD Skin Undetectable Longwear Foundation. I think this is like their third, fourth, or fifth iteration of this foundation formulation, and I've never been able to find a perfect match, but I went ahead and picked up shade 4Y60, which used to be shade Y503, which is Warm Almond. It's for tan to deep skin with yellow undertones. This was the best match I was able to find from this foundation collection. The shades that are still within my depth are too orange or too red, so this is just the best one, and it works pretty decently. I can make it work. I blend it out. Again, I can make it work, but it's just not my perfect shade match. The formulation too is the best one they've had so far, or the one that I consider the best. This is the one that looks the best on my skin tone. It's not too sticky, not too glowy, but it's still not my favorite foundation from them. Then we have this foundation from One Size by Patrick Starr. It's the Turn Up the Base Blurring Foundation. I picked up the shade Medium Dark 3, which is medium dark with rosy undertones. This one, it's cute, okay, but I got rid of it. The texture is just off. I like the texture initially, but I feel like this foundation turned pretty quickly. And it was one of the newer foundations in my collection. It just started to ball up a bit and I got rid of it, but it was a nice skin match. It blended out really well, and I did like the finish and coverage, but again, it just went bad really quickly. Keeping up with some of the newer foundations in my collection that are still in the mid to high end range, we have the Il Makiage Woke Up Like This Flawless Base Foundation. I have two shades. We have shade 150, which is meant for tan skin with pink undertones. This one actually does read very pink on me, but I can make it work. But again, it's not my perfect match because it has that pinker undertone that obviously shows up a little bit too pink on me. Then I picked up shade 160, which is for tan skin with neutral undertones. And this one is a much better match. It is more of a true neutral undertone. There is no golden hue to it. And this one works really well for my skin tone. And I do really like this foundation. It's just that their shade range is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit difficult to match. They have a quiz that you can go through. I will link a video that I did for this. But the 160 shade actually works pretty well, and I also picked up a third shade, but I didn't swatch it in this video, which is 175, which actually works best for me, especially when I have a tan. And that one, 175, is actually for tan skin with yellow undertones. So if you were using me as a skin tone match, I would go with shade 160 or the 175 that I didn't swatch in this video. Then we have the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Serum Foundation. I picked up the shade 16N, which is meant for tan to dark skin with neutral olive undertones, which sounds like a perfect description of my skin tone. And this one actually works pretty well, but it's a little bit too olive and can read a little bit gray on my skin tone. So I have to be careful. I need a foundation that still has olive or neutral undertones, but leans a little bit more on the golden side. I don't like this foundation though. It's just too glowy for me. And then we have the Rare Beauty Positive Light Tinted Moisturizer. This one I picked up in shade 44N, which is for medium deep skin with neutral undertones. This is a great little foundation or tinted moisturizer, but 44N is a little bit too orange, so I went ahead and picked up 42N, which actually works a lot better. I didn't swatch it again in this video. I'm sorry about that. But I do like this foundation. I think it has a great lightweight texture to it. It is supposed to be a tinted moisturizer type of product, so it's lightweight. And this foundation shade, the 44N, still works for me. It's just 42N is a lot better because it's not as orange. Let's talk about IT Cosmetics. I have two of their formulations. First up is the CC Plus Nude Glow Lightweight Foundation. I have 3 shades of this that they sent my way. First up is Tan Rich. This is for tan to rich complexions with cool rosy undertones. This shade is definitely a little bit more on the cool tone side, but for some reason it still works on my complexion. Even though it's supposed to be rosy, it actually blends in pretty well with my skin tone compared to the other shades, which are Rich, which is meant for tan to rich complexions with warm golden undertones. This one is definitely more on the warm side. It definitely has a little bit more golden hue to it. I can also make this one work. So it's a lightweight product, so it blends in pretty well with my skin. And then the third shade is Rich Honey, which is meant for tan to deep complexion with warm undertones. And they're deeper, richer shades in this line, which I'm surprised by that they expanded the shade range finally, and you're able to get richer tones in this product. So Rich Honey is meant for tan to deep complexions with warm undertones. Again, this is a shade that I can make work because of the formulation. It is a deeper, richer tone, so I'd wear it when I have more of a tan in the summertime. And it does have more of a neutral lean-in undertone. It's not too warm or too orange, and that's what I find with IT Cosmetics. They have really neutral undertones, like neutral as in gray, and it can go 0 to 100 real quick, but they tend to work for my skin tone because they don't lean too orange or too peach. The next one I have from them is the CC Plus Cream Oil-Free Matte, and this one is actually really nice. In this one I have the shade Rich, which doesn't indicate what the undertone is, but this is more on the golden side. It's definitely more warm golden, and it works decently on my skin tone. It's a little bit too light, as you can see, but again, it's more of a lightweight foundation, and because it's matte, it dries a little bit richer than it looks in the swatches, and once it's blended out, you can definitely make it work. And this formulation is really great. So I do like this formula, and I like that they've added deeper shades, but I still cannot find my shade match. Here we have a couple more of my stick foundations, and these are from mid-range brands. So we have from Merit the Minimalist Perfecting Complexion Foundation and Concealer Stick. I have two shades of this foundation. I have Khaki, which is described as medium tan with golden undertones. This is way too light for me. It is very light, but it does have a golden undertone. I can use this as an under eye like brightening, lifting concealer, or use it as a highlighter because it matches like that golden undertone, but it is way too light for my complexion. And then I have Tiger Eye, which is described as deep with neutral undertones. This again is way too rich for my complexion. It's way too dark. I can probably use it as a contour, but none of these shades match. And I don't think any of their shades in their collection would work for me. These were sent my way, so I didn't really have a choice. And the formulation isn't one that would make me interested in finding a true shade match. You know what I mean? So I can skip this one. I can do without it. Then we have the Nude Sticks Nudies Tinted Blur Stick. Again, I have two shades of this foundation. First up is Nude Medium 7, which is a light nude tan. This shade is a decent shade match for me and undertone. It's a little bit more on the peachy side, but it balances out with some of those golden undertones, so it actually works pretty well on my skin tone. And then I have Nude Deep number 8, which is a medium nude tan. And this one is a richer, deeper shade, and it has more of that orange lean-in undertone, which doesn't really work well for me. So if I had to choose, I would go with shade number 7 over number 8. Number 8 is almost like a bronzer orangey shade on me. Alright, so there you have it, guys. I just swatched the majority of my foundation collection, and I say majority because this video was quite an undertaking. It has been months in the making, and there are a couple of newer foundations in my collection that I didn't swatch in this video because I just received them and the swatches were already done and I wasn't able to fit them into this content. But if you're curious about some of the newer foundations that I have in my collection, just check out my Get Ready With Me videos. Some of them I've already done like full reviews for, so definitely just search my channel to find those different specific videos. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it does serve as a good resource for you if you use me as a shade match for your foundations. Like I said, this was a huge video, a lot of editing, a lot of filming, and I finally finished it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. It is 4 years in the making. I try to do these once every 2 years just to give myself enough time to try out enough foundations for it to make sense to do a new collection video. And this one was long overdue, and I was finally able to do it and then get rid of like a ton of foundations after that. So I did a massive declutter before I moved to Florida, and I got rid of all the shades that didn't match me, the formulations that I didn't like. So my foundation collection is now definitely whittled down. It's not necessarily manageable. I don't think I'll ever have a manageable collection, but it's down to a size that I'm a little bit more comfortable with and I don't feel as overwhelmed. And I do have some real gems in my collection that are my go-to formulations. So if you want me to do a video sharing with you my updated go-to foundations, then let me know. And other than that, I'm going to leave as much detail as I can down below in the description box, which can get pretty full. So if there are things that aren't mentioned, just ask me in the comments. I will probably even try to continue the list in the comments in case that helps you guys out. I will do my best, okay? It's a lot of information to contain in one description box and in one video, so feel free to ask me questions in the comments. And again, I can do a follow-up video if there is a specific topic that you want me to cover or like a specific segment of the collection, just let me know. And I will also leave links to my Instagram and Twitter where you should be following me along. And until my next video, which will be very soon, I'll talk to you. Bye, guys.